Hi, and very shortly after my last one, I'm going to do another community-inspired vlog. This time around, why so many raid guilds stuck on 3 out of 10 mythic bosses. Now, this was sparked by a forum post again on MMO Champion. Now, after my last one, don't worry, I don't think this one's going to be as long. I think one is a much more open and shut case. I will warn you though, I am going to make a lot of objective statements. What I mean by that is I'm going to make statements as if they're facts. You're free to disagree with them because I am basing conclusions on a few assumptions, as we have to in this case. So yeah, disagree with them down below, no problem at all. Would be nice if you explained your reasoning though. You are wrong is great, nice one, but you're not going to convince me. So what was the actual question? Well, the post was this. It says, currently there are over 2,000 guilds stuck at 3 out of 10 mythic in the Nighthold. Come to the actual figures in a minute, which is quite a problem. It is almost statistically impossible to kill any of the 7 remaining bosses without a majority of the raid having 54 artifact traits. Do you see this as a big problem? The title of the post is, over 2,000 guilds stuck at 3 out of 10 mythic, was tuning 7 bosses to 54 traits a mistake? Now, first things first, let's get the actual facts out of the way. The last 7 bosses in Mythic Nighthold have not been tuned around 54 traits. Doesn't necessarily make the discussion that could ensue from this completely invalid, although they have, you know, scuppered themselves to a certain extent by stating a few things wrong. Mythic Nighthold splits very neatly into 3 parts. You have the first 3 bosses, which are the easy bosses. You have the next 4 bosses, which are the medium bosses. You have the final 3 bosses, which are the harder bosses. Now, Blizzard have actually said, in fact, a tweet from Ian Hazakostas, which I'll put up somewhere. Star Augur onwards were indeed tuned for 54. Star Augur onwards. So the last 3, not the last 7. But that's because we looked at the audience and the audience was already at 54. So in other words, what they're saying was they had not planned to tune those last few bosses around 54. They had already seen that the sort of guilds that were going to get onto that in a reasonable pace were already 54 before Nighthold came out. That was the thing. Remember, this had taken Blizzard by surprise. They didn't actually anticipate a lot of people getting 54 by the time Nighthold came out. But a lot of very dedicated people who spent a lot of time farming artifact power did just that. To the point where even semi-hardcore guilds, such as the one I'm in, could reasonably expect people to get 54, at least by the time that Mythic Nighthold came out on the 2nd week of Nighthold. So that's one thing that's completely wrong there, and as I say, also the reasoning. However, they did also say, I haven't got the tweet for that, but I do remember him also saying that they are going to bear this in mind. They have actually acknowledged that that aspect of it was a bit of a mistake. Sorry, a little coughing break there. Still got a bit of a cough. So what Blizzard have said, what Watchers said was, it was a bit of a mistake doing that. I think that probably stems from the fact that although the initial guilds had 54, and we're not even talking about like the top 10, 20, or anything like that. The top several hundred had 54, even top 1,000 potentially to a certain extent, within a reasonable amount of time. The ones following up later wouldn't necessarily, and still may not. There can be actually mythic raiders on like 35, you know, on the same number of artifact traits I have on my alt, which I hardly ever play, because some people are just not farming that AP. And it is a difficult one for them, but I'm not going to talk too much about that because I want the focus to be very much on why are there so many guilds on 3 out of 10. And it's going to be a sort of a harshish one. Now, if we look at the actual numbers, so 6,500 on Mythic Scorpion as I look at today, just under 5,000 kill Chronomatic Anomaly, just under 4,500 kill Trilliax, and then the next one after that we've got just under 1,800, so less than half, quite a bit less than half, have killed Mythic Croesus, and then followed by Spellblade Aurora, so on. The reality of the situation is this. The first 3 bosses are just a hell of a lot easier. Now, that may bruise some egos. There might be these several thousand guilds. They've killed the first 3 bosses. They cannot kill Croesus. You've got to think about the sort of mistakes they may be making. The first mistake is potentially kill order. You look at the next 4. Croesus, Spellblade, Tichondrius, Botanist. Different guilds kill these in very different orders. The order we killed them in my guild was Croesus, Tichondrius, Spellblade, Botanist. Now, if I was to say that, some people in other guilds might go, that's a funny kill order. it was based upon the merits and weaknesses of our own guild for suitability for it. Spellblade, for example, was not one of the first ones of those we killed because we didn't have 5 healers at the time. Yes, okay, possible to kill it with 4 healers. Much more difficult. So we killed Croesus first. Croesus was largely a DPS check and just being able to soak stuff. Tichondrius, not actually that difficult a fight. A little bit of a DPS check there and then, but, you know, we had the raid setting to be able to do that. You know, so we did it in the order we did it. Other people did it in a completely different order. So a lot of those guilds that are stuck, maybe they're hammering away at a particular boss because they think, oh, well, maybe they're hammering away at Croesus and they're thinking to themselves, well, lots of other guilds kill that first, so we should. Well, maybe that's not right for them. Another thing is that you've just got to accept it. The skill required and the organisation, it's not necessarily the skill of the players as such, that will be part of it, but the organisation, their ability of their raid leader to be able to manage people on the first 3 fights, totally different to the other ones. There's a great deal more coordination required of those middle 4 bosses. There's also a great deal more personal responsibility required because you can't always be told everything. On the other bosses, raid leader can essentially say, do this now, and everyone sort of does it, and do this now, and everyone sort of does it. There's much less of that on the other 4 bosses. There's much more of a, some things can be called out, but other things you just have to recognise that you have to do a thing then that's maybe different to what other people have to do. There is this step, and you get this step in all raid tiers, and I think why, if it's an issue at all in some people's minds, the only reason it is an issue here is because the raid has actually divided so very neatly. If we think back to Hellfire Citadel, which was the last tier where you'd call it a tier because there was tier gear in it, it wasn't so neat. You had, you know, bosses, the first, okay, few bosses were the easier bosses, but then you had a couple that were a little bit trickier. Then you had Gorfiend, which was a very, very hard boss. Then after Gorfiend, you had another couple of easier bosses, very easy bosses, really. And then you had some difficult ones. Then it got to Manaroth and Archimon, which were the other really difficult ones. So it went up and down a bit. Here it's first 3, so easy. In fact, I'll tell you how easy they were. The good, strong, semi-hardcore guilds killed the first 3 bosses in the first night. Decent semi-hardcore guilds like ourselves, we killed those first 3 in the same reset. That first reset it came out, we killed them all. Then after that, you know, you slow down a little bit. I mean, some of the better ones, even semi-hardcore guilds, maybe killed 4 or 5 within the first reset, and then another one after that, another one after that, and so on. So, and it's just a real steep curve between those. And then, of course, Star Augur onwards, those are the ones that are tuned around 54, so you need that gear as well. Now, not saying that having better gear wouldn't help with these things, because, of course, better gear always gives you a larger margin for error for certain things. It helps you beat DPS checks where you maybe the skill or the composition of the raid, because that's another thing to bear in mind. I have a devil of a job recruiting at the moment. I'm desperate. By the way, if there's any good ranged DPS players, hit me up. If you're on EU and speak English. But it's so difficult. And if it's difficult in our position where we're 7 out of 10, how much more difficult will it be for people on 3 out of 10? They must all the time be getting what are effectively heroic quality players. And as I always say, your best heroic raider could easily be your worst mythic raider. Because good quality heroic raiders tend to be really good at doing damage. They know their class well. They do lots of damage. Totally useless at mechanics. As soon as you get past the first few bosses on Mythic, being useless at mechanics, bit of a barrier. First 3 bosses, there's mechanics to do as well, but you can sort of, other people can sort of pick up the slack. Not saying that can't happen to any extent on the next 4 bosses. A lot more difficult though. A lot more. One person can wipe you quite easily. And that, you know, I'm not going to keep going on about it. That is ultimately the reason. And as I say, that's my objective statement. The difficulty level is so much higher that those sort of guilds, and they think their item level is really good, because when I do look at recruitment, there's loads of people with really high item level, higher item level than I have. But then you look at them and they're doing, and their artifact level is good as well. Because as I say, I've spent a lot of time recruiting. You see people, good item level, they've got their 54 traits in their artifact weapon. Then you look at how much damage they're actually doing. Shit. And I don't mean it's not that good. I mean, 200 or 300 DPS below the lowest DPS in our roster. And you just think to yourself, and these people are in Mythic Guilds. So the Mythic Guilds who are stuck on 3 out of 10, I'm just going to summarise and tell exactly what's wrong. First of all, they may not be coordinating very well. Their actual raid leaders may not be coordinating very well or presenting the tactics very well. Secondly, those individual players are maybe too focused on their damage output or just output in general and not at all focusing on dealing with mechanics, which have to be dealt with. Thirdly, they may just be bad players. It's just got to put it like that. And I don't want to be offensive about that. I never blame people for being bad. I am bad by the standards of much better players than myself. And I wouldn't want them giving me a hard time any more than I'd want to give anyone a hard time. But the fact of the matter is, if you are, like, I am a 7 out of 10 Mythic Guild. So we're not amazing. We've not beaten any of the hard bosses yet, but we've just about done the medium bosses. And if your players, some of your better players, are doing 200 or 300 DPS less on the same fights than our weaker DPS, that's where a lot of your trouble's coming in. That's just all where it's coming in. And there it is, as simple as that. So hopefully I've kept that relatively short for you. Those who said the last one was too long, really quick and easy one. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you find it interesting. If you have, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.